Welcome everybody to the Community Empowerment and Sustainable Partnerships with Local Government panel. This is the heart of the day. The overarching theme, of course, is collaboration is necessary for restorative development in our watersheds. Can we design with nature to get it right? The session has two parts. First, to prime the audience, we're going to showcase success stories resulting from local government and stewardship sector collaboration. Panel members here today will paint a picture of what collaboration must look like in a practice to achieve the vision for restorative development in our mid-island watersheds. Panelists have agreed to provide a 5-minute presentation that showcases an example of how partnerships and collaboration are important in watershed restoration. So we have 6 presentations. So to make the most efficient use of time, there'll be no questions from the audience until the presentations are completed. Then we move to the town hall segment, and that's the roving mic. That's where Richard gets to run around with his microphone, and you guys get to be the important part of the session. So you get to you have an opportunity to ask questions of panelists and showcase any project on restoration that you think we should all hear about, to reflect on the 4 C's: communication, cooperation, coordination, or collaboration between water stewards and local government. We want you to reflect on the value of citizen science and how it can be leveraged to achieve 2 complementary objectives: educating local community, i.e. the public, and provide an impetus for political action and results in implementation of environmental policy at a local government or higher level. So, many of our panelists, I don't think we don't need a long introduction. We'll present in the following order. I will lead off. Now, I do wear 2 hats. I've been a director on the Partnership for Water Sustainability for a few years, but also since about 2011, I've been a member of the Mid-Vancouver Island Habitat Enhancement Stewards. That's the fancy swag and the yellow boots that I'm wearing today. Next, we'll go to, so I'm going to have a stewardship perspective. Next, we're going to Paul Chapman, Acting Executive Director with the Nanaimo Area Land Trust, and he will have a land trust perspective. Paul. Beside him is Julie Pisani, coordinator of the RDN's Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Program. Julie is here, and she will have kind of a regional government perspective on this issue. Next to Julie is Rob Lawrance, environmental planner, and with the City of Nanaimo, and he will have a local or municipal government perspective. Next to Rob, we have Ashley Van Aken. She is coordinator with UNESCO's designated Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere region. Now, her job focuses on reconciliation with First Nations and promoting sustainable development, preservation, and biodiversity outreach. Now, Shelly is going to talk to us and is a lead researcher on the Wetland Mapping and Monitoring Program. So, with the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Research, or MABRE, she'll provide an academic perspective on our panel today. And last but not least is the guy on the far end. That's Dave Clough. What can we say about Dave? If you've never heard of Dave, you must be from Alberta. Dave has been a valuable support for stewardship community for years, and we value his time and participation on this panel. Now, my second role is to act as a moderator for this group, and I'll try to keep the speakers on time to ensure lots of opportunity to be heard. So for fun, I have grabbed a bag of stale buns. So if I think things are going off the rails, presentations are taking too long, questions from the audience are not related to the topic, watch out for flying buns. My opportunity to keep things rolling and also provide a bit of levity. Okay, so everybody is going to hop up and I'm going to start the presentation on my project. Don't touch the bun. Okay, in the next 5 minutes, I'd like to highlight the efforts of our local streamkeeper group to restore Shelly Creek. Now, our experience to date indicates that a whole system approach is required to understand how best to restore this degraded creek shed. Neighbours came into existence in 1998 with a mission of conservation and restoration of salmon habitat on the endangered Englishman River watershed. Over the years, our streamkeeper group was blessed to have a fearless leader in Faye Smith, seen here before her passing in her fashionable yellow gumboots. Faye recognized that watershed restoration can only be successful if it involves the community in a collaborative effort. Since 2010, we have focused our monitoring on the Shelly watershed in a small tributary in the lower Englishman River by Parksville. Its headwaters are roadside ditches in Arrington, flowing through typical East Coast Island landscapes to meet the river near the estuary. Over the years, we've involved hundreds of local volunteers in projects to assess Shelly Creek's ability to produce fish. Today, I have some good news, some bad news, and some very ugly news about Shelly. The good news is that the creek provides limited but valuable habitat for coho and trout populations. The bad news is that water quality in the fall, specifically its turbidity values, are the highest in Oceanside. The ugly news is that the stream channel is suffering from severe erosion and low summer flows. So, we knew we had a very sick creek, so we went to our local stream doctor, Dr. Dave Clough, for his diagnosis, and Dr. Dave said he referred us to a specialist, in this case a geomorphologist, who after close examination said the problem that the creek is experiencing is caused by changes to natural hydrology in the watershed. He recommended a hydrology study, and specifically the water balance model. So, what is the water balance model? And as we've already heard this morning through Kim, it's a model that changes the water footprint models the water footprint of land as it is developed at 3 scales, from the site level to subdivision scale to the watershed. Site development data inputs are modeled with other environmental, land use, and physical data to establish measures to protect stream flows in the watershed. So, our group hired, with funding from PSF and the RDN in Parksville, we hired Jim Dumont, a professional engineer and agrologist with 35 years of experience in rainwater management, to complete the Shelly Creek water balance and sediment reduction study. We asked him to answer 2 questions. What is causing the creek to erode? And 2, to determine what the water balance of Shelly Creek is to restore its natural hydrology. His reports are on our website. To determine how rainwater reaches the creek, Jim reviewed the watershed's environmental and land use conditions. Then, using 20 years of hourly rainfall records, he modeled flow scenarios. The study concluded that stream erosion is a result of an increase in the number of hours where the creek's flows are at bank full levels. Today, Shelly Creek now has 5 times more erosion-causing flow events than it did 40 years ago. As land develops in the watershed, coupled with climate change, the duration of these flows are predicted to grow 14 times greater than pre-development flows. So how has this happened? When rainwater hits the ground, water flows to the creek in 3 pathways shown in the diagram. Water balance modeling for Shelly Creek predicted that 60% of stream flows are generated from rainwater flowing through the spongy soils 1 to 2 meters below the surface. Land development changes these water balance proportions, and interflow is transformed into surface runoff, as is the case in roadside ditching. So can we put the genie back in the bottle? Can we restore stream flows to natural conditions? Well, yes, we can. The report established rainwater targets for Shelly Creek, so that when land is developed, site-specific measures can be implemented as part of the development, as exemplified in a properly designed rain garden. Setting rainwater targets was one of 6 proposed in the study, and I'm not going to discuss them here, but the good news is that if we implemented these mitigation works, the size and mitigation works, and we can actually reduce the size and magnitude of today's stream discharges, and that's a good thing. To date, we're grateful for the support, both financial and professional guidance, provided by the City of Parksville, the RDN's Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Program, DFO's Salmon Enhancement Program, and the Partnership for Water Sustainability. In future, to implement many of the report's recommendations, we know we must seek rainwater solutions in the land development approval process in Shelly Creek and Oceanside. The only way we think we can do this now is to build trust with local area representatives, local staff, and developers, and collaborate on some win-win rainwater projects. In the weeks and months ahead, MIVI's volunteers will also be engaging our neighbors who live in the watershed to discuss how the community can help restore Shelly Creek. Our theme has always been, watershed health depends on you. The legacy of Faye Smith and her mantra of engaging the community continues. Thanks.
Hi again, I'm Paul Chapman with the Nanaimo Area Land Trust. We've been a society and registered charity since 1995. In fact, on Saturday we turned 23, so happy birthday to us. Our mission is to promote and protect the natural values of land in the Nanaimo area. The natural values of land include water too. This isn't quite flicking over like it was supposed to. So from the beginning, water stewardship has been an important piece of NALT's concerns in the area. And that started with Project 2000 and what you can see there of stream teams. These initiatives covered 17 creeks in the Nanaimo area. And so we're thinking way back to the good old days. Well, here are some of the good old days. I think some of you will recognize this as large woody panel debris. Now, I think everyone would, even in 1995, would recognize that parking your car in the creek is an egregious act, but they didn't and still may not recognize that washing your car beside a storm drain that leads to the creek can also be not a great thing. The connection hadn't been made between that storm drain and the creek shed. And I'm going to use creek sheds when I remember to. And it's that, we all live in these creek sheds, and we have to think about the watersheds we're in. So the Project 2000 was about community engagement, empowerment, and activation. So through a series of meetings, we raised awareness about the watersheds that people live in, about where that storm drain leads to. We were able to provide the space for people to take streamkeeper workshops and become activated as stewards, and also to do some restoration work in those 17 creeks. This was a success. We had great collaboration with all levels of government and the communities. When I say all levels of government, especially the City of Nanaimo, I think Harriet's here somewhere. She was a big part of that. And it's what collaboration is what allows us to do more than we can do. It's that, we heard a bit of it last night, that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. These relationships that we build allow us to do more together than we can individually. So here's an example in Nanaimo, Departure Creek. NALT has been involved with and as Boots in the Creek, and also supporting the Boots in the Creek. So we've been able to, working with the Departure Bay Streamkeepers, the Departure Bay Neighborhood Association, the Departure Bay Eco School, Eco Clubs from other schools, the City of Nanaimo, the Regional District, MOE, PSF, DFO. We've been able to support these efforts, and it's a really great and active neighborhood association and streamkeeper group there. And sometimes we can help that with our structure that we have, and so we can provide insurance coverage for volunteers doing work in the stream. Streamkeepers offers a similar function too. Another area of collaboration is through the Regional District of Nanaimo's Community Watershed Monitoring Program. So the RDN provides the equipment and the training to monitor, to collect data of indicators of stream health. And we are able to help support some of those less formal groups meet the insurance requirements that they need to take part in this program. So we have volunteers out there, NALT volunteers, doing some of this work. Streamkeepers. We've heard quite a bit about streamkeepers, and I'm glad because I certainly don't have enough time to cover it off. But the way that NALT has been able to support streamkeepers is finding funding so that we can present streamkeeper workshops at a minimal cost. That's there's a streamkeeper workshop coming up April 21st, 22nd. I think there's still 2 or 3 spots, maybe 4 if you twist Dave's arm. So again, if you're interested in that, find me at lunch and we'll see if we can get you on a list or a wait list, because we intend to hold more of them. As long as that interest is there, we'll keep doing it. The Nanaimo River Watershed is also another place of collaboration that we've been involved with. So the water we're all drinking comes from the Nanaimo River. The coffee we're all drinking, that, you know, the water in that comes from the Nanaimo River. So this started as an initiative from a symposium about the Nanaimo River Watershed in 2011, and from that a working group coalesced to develop terms of reference that eventually became the Nanaimo River Watershed Roundtable. The interesting thing with the roundtable is that the folks sitting around the table might not normally share a table. So we have environmental groups, we have advocacy groups, we have interested individuals, we have major landowners, individual landowners, the forestry industry, Harmac's there. We have a broad base of people, VIUs there, around that table, and you know, we've come I'd say a short way on a long journey. But the saying is, if you want to go fast, you go alone, and if you want to go far, you go together. And I think that's what we're aiming to do. We want to go far, we want to go together, we want to build toward lasting change. So those are the ways that NALT is involved in stream stewardship and the ways NALT supports stream stewardship. We have, because of the structure we've developed over 23 years, we can help support activities on different streams at different levels depending on the engagement you want to have with NALT. It's pretty easy to become a volunteer with NALT. Our volunteer coordinator is here today. I'll point you to her if you come up and find me at lunch and get on that list. That provides the insurance that you may need to participate in things like the drinking water and watershed protection community, whatever. And also, if it's a more formal engagement, then we have other ways we can support you as well. So thank you very much.
My name is Julie Pisani. I work with the Regional District of Nanaimo, coordinating our drinking water and watershed protection program. I'm going to be going into our program as a whole in our afternoon session. So if there's questions about that, we'll direct that to the afternoon session. But right now I'm going to be speaking about our Community Watershed Monitoring Network. So to start off, here's a map of the Regional District of Nanaimo with the streams and tributaries all highlighted in blue here. So you can see our region extends to the north as far as Deep Bay, and to the south as far as Yellow Point Cedar area, and then inland to Mount Arrowsmith, Cameron Lake area, bordering on the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District to the west of us. And so what this illustrates is just how many watercourses, streams, rivers, all these tributaries there are within our region. And what it also illustrates is that these rivers, streams, and tributaries cross jurisdictional boundaries. So I can place our RDN boundaries on the map, and I can show you where Nanaimo's boundaries and Lanceville and Parksville and Qualicum Beach's boundaries are, but the streams and creeks overlap these boundaries. So with all these creeks and streams and all these watercourses within our large region, it begs the question, well, how do we go about understanding the health of all these surface water sources? And so, I kind of package it into these elements. We need to collect data. So we need to have that water quality monitoring, that oversight, that information. The data is really important. But we also need to involve the community, have the buy-in on the local level, and have participation with people who care and people who live within these watersheds, creek sheds. And it requires a long-term commitment. This isn't just a 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, or even 1 year. It's not even a single decade endeavor. This is a long-term endeavor to really learn more about the health of our watercourses and track the health over time. So this lofty proposition, I think, requires this key ingredient, which is partnerships. So what I'm going to speak about a little bit in my 3 minutes I probably have left now is the regional coordination element as the key to success. It's cut off a little bit, but that's okay. So that's where we've established this long name that Paul stumbled over, and I'll try and not stumble over myself, which is our Community Watershed Monitoring Network, CWMN, which covers essentially looking at surface water quality indicators in as many creeks as we can across our region. And we coordinate this regionally through our drinking water and watershed protection program. What this serves to do is to fill gaps in the existing or the pre-existing provincial network of water quality monitoring sites. And we provide direct support to local streamkeepers. So further to this, let's look at the partnerships that are central to our community watershed monitoring network. We have the stewardship groups, so the volunteer stewards who are out in the stream, they're the boots in the stream collecting that data. We also partner with the Provincial Water Quality Branch with the Ministry of Environment, and they provide us with the data standards and the oversight and analysis that's required to provide credence to a program like this. We also partner with private forestry. So for an example, Island Timberlands provides land access in the upper watersheds that are privately held within our region that they own, and provides safety gear for the stewards that are going up into the upper watersheds to collect data. The regional government role with the RDN is that we coordinate this program. So, we get the volunteer communications going. We do the data entry after the data is collected by the stewardship groups. It's entered into provincial databases, and we make sure that that data is usable by decision makers at the local and provincial level. So a little bit on scope here, another map of the region. So here we illustrate all the sample sites that are being monitored by stewardship groups. So about 57 sample sites, which is an expansion on the 3 to 5 sites that were monitored prior to this program starting when it was just in the hands of the provincial government. So yes, it is a provincial role to collect data and understand freshwater resources, but you have to bear in mind the province is looking at the entire province of BC. We are looking at our region, and by partnering at the regional level, we can expand the understanding. So it's cut off there, it's 13 community groups that participate, 57 sample sites in 32 creeks and streams within about 24 watersheds within our region. So that is remarkable scope. And I'm going to eat up a minute, but we've got the Fanny Bay Salmonid Enhancement Society that partner with us, Now Creek Enhancement Society, Qualcomm Beach Streamkeepers, Mid-Vancouver Island Habitat Enhancement Society, Friends of French Creek Stewards, Nanaimo Streamkeepers, Island Waters Fly Fishers, Departure Creek Streamkeepers, Wally Creek Streamkeepers, Vancouver Island University Fish and Aqua, Nanaimo Area Land Trust, Lanceville Streamkeepers, and Gabriola Streamkeepers. You guys are awesome. And so these gold stars are essentially for our community group volunteers. They are the ones who go out and collect the data on the streams. They're trained to provincial protocol, so we through the RDN provide that training, but that's handed down to us from the Ministry of Environment to ensure a high standard of data collection. Samples take place once a week for 5 weeks in the low flow summer period and once a week for 5 weeks in the fall flush period. Again, these are standards handed down by the provincial government, so the data that's collected can readily go into their databases and be analyzed in such a way it can be used to inform decisions. So what are they sampling for? These are the key 4 baseline parameters that are being monitored. It's turbidity, which is the particulate matter that can enter the water through sedimentation and such. Temperature, dissolved oxygen, so key parameters for aquatic health. And specific conductivity, which can be an indicator of groundwater influence in a creek or stream. And again, these were selected based on provincial government direction as to what baseline indicators would be the most useful. In terms of equipment, we do use monitoring equipment, again, recommended by the province as the best for this task. And that's coordinated through our program in terms of purchasing the equipment, maintaining, calibrating the equipment, providing that training, doing the data entry after the data is submitted, as well as the QA/QC, so quality assurance, quality control, and through partnership with the province as well as Island Timberlands. So I'm summing it up here. Regional coordination is the key to success, right? So what we're doing is building community engagement and trust amongst partners. If it was just one agency performing the monitoring in isolation, there wouldn't be that understanding of the partnership and the collaboration and how far we can get with that. So by working with stewardship volunteers, forestry, the province, and the regional government, we can gain a stronger understanding of the state of our streams. So we now have insight onto way more creeks than we previously had when we just kind of left that to the province. And that allows us to advocate for our region and influence decisions when it comes to local planning and water sustainability. So water quality sampling is just the beginning. I'll leave you with this. We also go on to do physical stream assessments. We provide stewardship seed funding for restoration projects that are recommended from the data that's collected. And we've recently started a streamside restoration tool lending library so that stewardship groups can actually borrow some equipment that's needed to go out and do some of the enhancement projects. And I'll leave it there. Thanks very much.
Over to me, Rob Lawrance. That's me. Thanks, Julie. So in my short time, I'm going to focus a little bit more on what I'm seeing in the trends of the partnerships that we're developing between local government and the many community groups. Beyond the stewardship groups, there's a number of organizations, individuals, clubs that have approached the city, and I'm seeing an interesting trend in how there's kind of a new welling of connection to our local natural spaces and parks that make me optimistic. And I'm an optimistic person, so it kind of underscores my values as well. So for those who haven't been to Nanaimo before, just a few quick stats: 90,000 people living here and enjoying this place, 91 square kilometers in area. But for those that are new here, definitely get off the highway. This is not the city of malls. There's such an intricate network of parks and natural spaces and places to really enjoy the community. So if you're here for a day or two, definitely get out and do that. Go down to the beaches, because this is an amazing community, and I'm really proud to work here for them. And as Julie kind of alluded to, partnership is definitely a key thing, because in our experience in local government, while we certainly have a clear role to play as far as water and watershed management, we have limits on what we can do. And it's working together with different organizations who have the different expertise that we can kind of complement those skills and move forward together. But there's barriers, there's roadblocks, there's issues that we need to overcome, and that takes time, and that takes opportunities like this to sit down as a group and discuss them and see how we can work together more effectively. So in the day of black and white TV long ago, the traditional view of local government was it was a big machine, and the staff people were out there, making sure the machine was effective and process was happening, and we were putting out permits and following all the regulatory requirements that we needed to do. But I'm here to say, though, that's certainly a changing view. That's not the case. We are much more of an interdepartmental organization. There's a lot of collaboration between departments and staff and management. The stovepipe mentality, while from an outside perspective that might be what we see, that's not the case. We do recognize the importance of environmental values and trying through our various departments how we can more effectively implement many of the regulations we have, and we recognize there's improvements that need to be made in some of those bylaws and regulations going forward. And we've had a long legacy of a great deal of policy on the watershed side, but also on the climate action side. Climate adaptation, for example, there is a fairly large and significant climate adaptation strategy we'll be beginning over the next couple of years. It'll be looking at the sea level rise concerns and the the future storm events that we can expect and how that's going to influence development along our creeks, watersheds, and shorelines in the near future. So we are trying to improve our regulations and requirements going forward with that. This is just simply a map of our official community plan, just to kind of underscore that, like many local governments, we use the traditional tools of development permit areas, zoning bylaws to try and flag and highlight key natural features. In Nanaimo's case, the steep slopes development permit area, environmentally sensitive areas. And through the stewardship work of some individuals who were from years gone by, that effort to create the ESAs and to do stewardship work on them led to the city designated Lotus pennatus, an endangered species, to become the city flower. But it's just symbolic of the values and the connection many people have in the community for these types of natural spaces and what they want to do to kind of highlight the importance of them. This is just simply the zoning bylaw, just to simply say, as I mentioned before, regulations about setback areas, about what is required in relation to development and how close development can be to watercourses. And I think Nanaimo took a little more of an aggressive stance, because as opposed to just simply following provincial requirements for setbacks, we have followed a policy of using something called top of bank, where we go in many cases beyond what provincial requirement requires for setback areas, and tries to follow that through the development process. But I'll tell you this, the reality is, and as Paul alluded in his earlier email, there's a legacy we have to live with in many of our watercourses. Many places were used as fill sites in the past. I've run across places where we've done planting and we've been pulling up garbage along the side of creeks that are buried in the soil. There's dumping sites that have been left for many, many years. Invasive species is rampant throughout the community. So clearly there's limits to what local government can do after development is completed and after the maintenance periods are done for any restoration or planting plans that leave us lacking. So this is where we need working with the community. This is where programs like Partners in Parks, where we work with the local residents and we work with the stewardship community to improve our parks, either through playgrounds, sport fields, but also doing more to work with developing our urban forest canopy, working with students to learn more about what stewardship means through art, through educational programs with organizations like the Nanaimo Science and Sustainability Society. This is where we can kind of build a stronger connection with community. And this is just an example of some of the groups that we've been working with. Groups that have been working on the playground at Lindley Point Gyro have also been restoring the riparian area along the watercourses as well. Okay, I got my message. I'm just going to skip it. Well, here's an important point. Give me a minute.
1 minute.
Restoration as therapy is another thing we're seeing as an interesting kind of evolution. There's groups that have come forward that see this as an opportunity to reconnect with community and work as a motion of therapy. This is a photo of a group called Bill's Place, who work with clients with brain trauma injury, and through going out and doing restoration projects, they use this as a way of engaging their clients with the community again, because many people who visit the parks see the group and interact with them, but they also learn more about understanding the nature and the restoration values that are necessary for many of these park sites. So I think it's a great win-win situation, and it's an interesting trend we're seeing. And as again, education with our high schools, with our eco clubs, and providing opportunities throughout the city is another thing we highlight. Going forward, this is my last slide. I think our next upcoming challenge is looking at natural assets and what we can do to better finance and sustain any kind of restoration work going forward into the future, and working with our stewardship partners. In this case, this was a case study that was done for Buttertup's Marsh that I can see going forward we could develop much more of a tighter, stronger more sustainable kind of program for financing projects that require management plans in this particular case. So overcoming barriers, the only thing I can say is, all right, I'm going to leave it for the questions. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Ashley Van Aken. I am the coordinator at the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere region, and today I'm going to give you a quick 5-minute overview of wetland mapping in the regional district of Nanaimo. And so this project was initiated in 2016 in partnership with the regional district of Nanaimo, Vancouver Island University, the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region Research Institute, and the Mid-Vancouver Island Habitat Enhancement Society. And so this project was developed to address an existing data gap regarding wetlands and where they're located, what they're classified as, and what role they might play in groundwater recharge. And so why is this important? There's 140,000 residents within the regional district of Nanaimo from 4 member municipalities from the city of Nanaimo, the district of Lansville, the city of Parksville, and the town of Qualicum Beach. And many of these municipalities and electoral areas depend on groundwater for their municipal drinking demands. And so in a population and housing study done in 2006, population was projected to grow by 60%. And so this significant growth in population would further enhance land use. It would increase stresses that we're currently experiencing on our groundwater supplies with climate change, among other things. And so there was really a huge demand for trying to find innovative ways to enhance our policy and decision making within the RDN. And so this map here is a predictive map that we've created. It's an amalgamation of various data sets regarding wetlands, and it basically says across the RDN, this is where wetlands may exist under less than 6% slope, and this is what they are potentially classified as. And so as VIU is the lead research entity behind this mapping, student researchers are able to use this as baseline data. And we're able to say, okay, where are wetlands and what are we actually seeing in the field? And so we can have this comparative analysis to say, this is what is true to this mapping. And so to date, we've mapped 31 wetlands across 5 different water regions. And so an exciting part of this project is that we use the BC Wildlife Federation's long form from the Wetland Keepers course. And so this is a stewardship approach to citizen science. And so we've reworked it to collect more information on the geologic setting, vegetation, and wildlife, so we can better understand how this system plays such an integral role within the RDN. And for us, the biggest celebration is our current partners. We have our big funders from the Regional District of Nanaimo. We work directly with Julie, and we have funding as well from the Real Estate Foundation of British Columbia. We also like to work with BC Parks because they give us access, and members of the public who have wetlands on their property. So we're also super excited to work with the private landowners within the RDN, which is Island Timberlands and Timber West. Ultimately, we're working together to try and figure out how can we increase freshwater sustainability together, because we are all partners and we all live within the regional district of Nanaimo. And so ultimately, this project aims to use these collaborative partnerships to really enhance freshwater sustainability and to find innovative practices to see how we can all work together. So we hope to use our scientific data to better influence policy and land use decisions within the RDN, as well as share it with the public, because it's so important to have everybody's input and have everybody working together on a common goal. So ultimately, all of our data will be publicly accessible on our website and on the RDN's website, and we hope to disseminate it at public engagement events such as this, and we hope to preserve fresh water for our communities of tomorrow. Thank you.
Bag two.
My name's Dave Clough. I didn't bring any slides because I'm scared I'll talk too long if I just have more equipment. I would like to say that as a professional biologist, that's my career, but my heart is a stream keeper, and I was that first. Howard English down at Goldstream, a barber, taught me that value of caring for environment could come from anyone from any walk of life. Him and Freeman King were probably my biggest influences down in Victoria. But I have a whole lot more stewards I've met that are so inspiring and so awesome, that do the hard work that creates the data, that makes politicians listen, that restores the creeks, restores the wetlands, and engages with all levels of government. And so I see them in front of me right now. And they're the engine that's gonna make this work, Kim. These are the people that are there. So right in front of me is Gordon Sonia Tooker. They're probably representing Project Watershed, Little River Enhancement Society. Anybody else at your table? I think we've got the Solom River group somewhere. Stick your hand up. Solom River, where are you? I saw one of Jack Menard's buddies. Stand up. There he is. Okay, and let's just start at the back. Qualicum Streamkeepers, stand up. Go on. Mid-Vancouver Island Enhancement Society. The Nanaimo Area Land Trust. Wally Creek Streamkeepers. Departure Bay Neighborhood Association. Island Waters Fly Fishers. Nanaimo Community. Craig, you gotta help me here. Yes.
Food share and the 5-acre farm in Harewood.
Yep, there you are. Fanny Bay Enhancement Society. Who else is out there?
Vancouver Island Water Watch.
Thank you very much. Anybody here from Friends of French Creek? Or French Creek Hatchery? Awesome, there's Mike. Yeah. So before I get hit with a bun, because he's got another bag of them, look, Zoanne made mention of the Streamkeepers program and how we integrate. It is true, you can get a really good core of training from the Streamkeepers program. The basic data that tells us if watersheds are healthy or sick is in those guidebooks. You just run with that and you go further. And these people, the Julies, the Robs, Ashleys, Paul and Peter and all the rest of these people are just been a wonderful help at us Streamkeepers being able to run with that. I have to, and lastly, as everybody has said, we just recently lost some fantastic people. For me, it was Dave Chitty, Jake Leonar in Port Alberni, and of course Faye Smith recently in the Qualicum area. And I used to go out with Faye, and we did this one program with elementary school children, which I'm looking forward to somebody else picking up the baton on. And we literally called we'd grab school children in grade 1, Jeannie Campbell's class in Aerosmith Elementary, and we'd walk them from a storm. We'd take them to the roof gutter, and we tell them, you kids are all drips, and let's find out if you're going to be a dirty drip or a clean drip as you go down the watershed. And we'd walk them all the way down to Beach Creek, and I could tell you the wonderful experiences I had with those children and with Faye. And that's stewardship, and that's how you do it. And you start there and you take it home, and I think that was brought along by a few other speakers. So really, that's all I've got to say. I'm so proud to be here in front of all these wonderful stewards. Thanks.
Okay, everybody, come on up. Take your seats. We have to take our seats. No. Okay, so
now we go into the question and answer town hall roving mic portion.
I guess that's where I think some of these. So, what a great, dynamic, and diverse bit of information we just heard from all of our 6 panelists. Great work, everyone. So this next session is really about engaging with this body of knowledge and finding out and asking and answering questions on behalf of what you think or ideas that you might have that might make a difference. So I'm going to get things going to just generate some activity, and then we will kind of get things flowing. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to want people, as discussion or ideas come to your mind, put your hand up, and then I'll come to you and you'll have a chance to just engage with this group, right? And start to begin and exchange some ideas. So what I want to do is I've got a bit of an open question for Julie and Rob. You've heard the Shelly Creek story and the modeling work that was done. What are some ideas and tools that local and regional government could use to promote development that helps restore water balance, in particular things like interflow that we heard earlier?
Okay, well, thanks for the opportunity to get us started here. I'll jump in and then maybe Rob, you
Yeah, I can jump in.
Okay, so the Shelly Creek watershed, it's one of those watersheds that crosses jurisdictional boundaries. So the upper watershed is within electoral area F, so Arrington, part of the regional district of Nanaimo, and it flows downstream into the city of Parksville. So City of Parksville has like drainage engineering, and they have their department focusing on drainage in the electoral area and south side of municipalities. Rural road drainage is actually dealt with by Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. So there's immediately, even just looking at that, there's a gap between what the RDN has jurisdiction over in terms of drainage in those electoral areas. It requires right off the bat collaboration and conversation with the Ministry of Transportation as the folks who have oversight for that in the rural areas. But when I start thinking about, okay, well, what can the regional district do given this information, is I think there's a really good opportunity with land use planning in terms of official community plans, which sort of lay out the vision for the community and how it's going to develop. It's the high-level policies that the more specific policies follow from. And I think there's an opportunity because Area F, part of our region, will be coming up on its renewal and update of its official community plan. And so given these more recent studies that have taken place, like the Shelly Creek study, for an example, I think that information could directly inform the official community plan update process. And from there, maybe development permit areas could be some tools, and different planning tools can follow from that. So I think it's timely, and I think these sorts of studies do need an avenue for execution. It's not just the RDN for one avenue. It's also working with Ministry of Transport. It's also working with private landowners and forestry sector, and working with downstream municipality just to get started.
And I think just to follow up, some other tools certainly in the local government realm would be looking at your engineering and engineering standards to make sure that requirements by consulting engineers and developers look at the stormwater and the water flow on the development site as well, and certainly the educational tools that we can provide them through support from community groups and stewardship groups as well.
Is there anyone from Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure here? That would be like the first. No? Okay, just checking. Thanks.
Hi, I represent electoral area, regional district. I'm on a collision course with the elephant in the room that nobody's mentioned yet, the agricultural land reserve. I represent Arrington, Coombs, Hilliers, the largest expanse of unfarmable glacial till included in the agricultural land reserve. Area F has a lot of forest reserve. In fact, 60% is forest reserve, but 2/3 of the remaining area, which is classified as residential, roughly, is in the agricultural land reserve. How it ended up there, I don't know. They flew over, took some photographs, and colored in some squares on the map. Those of us who have to deal with the Agricultural Land Commission, which runs the commission is above local government. We have no control over them. They consider themselves sacred, we are profane, and boy do they let us know it. I have in my area a property which is probably going to become a lightning rod or poster boy for the conflict between the ALR and water. It's in a low spot. It sits right next to Shelly Creek. It's on Romney Creek. It is the catchment area of Romney Creek. Water flows to there, and then some of it goes underground into this interflow. The owner of the property wants to remove it from the reserve and have a large part of it classified as wetland, which is what it is. The Agricultural Commission says, no, it's farmland. All you have to do is apply standard farming drainage techniques and you can farm it. We've had a series of experts look at it and say this property is totally unfarmable, it's anoxic, there's no roots in the soil, it's the wrong kind of soil, and the topography is such that if you dug ditches to drain it, the water would flow in, not out. So we're sort of hitting an impasse there. What has been extremely useful to this process is the study done by Vancouver Island Enhancement Society on the interflow, because that quantified what is taking place in Romney Creek. Romney Creek sits right next to Shelly Creek, and it's virtually the same geology, same topography. And this gives us a tool to confront the mismanagement, as far as I'm concerned, by the Agricultural Land Commission. We are having in this area F, we have an OCP review coming up. And unfortunately, I won't be directed when it happens, but this would be an opportunity to include measures to ensure that stormwater goes into the ground rather than gets channeled off, which is what we have been seeing so far.
Any advice or comments on how to bring forward information to the Land Commission?
As the Land Trust, we've had difficulty pursuing conservation covenants on ALR land, and that we haven't yet made any headway that way. But there is an opportunity coming up. There'll be a meeting in Nanaimo where people have an opportunity to speak to the ALC about the ALR. I don't know if the date's been set yet, but it's coming up here, so there's an opportunity to have that conversation with some of the people who can make those changes or change their mindset about stuff. The ALR certainly is a challenge. We've ended up owning 2 pieces of property because we couldn't put conservation covenants on them. It's a real challenge for us too.
That's a difficult situation, but again, what I want to highlight here is through the application of some innovative tools and modeling work, the water balance approach, you're now in a better position in terms of interflow and hydrology than you were without that knowledge to go forward. So good for you for getting this information and this science around to continue moving your position forward. Richard?
Hi everyone, my name is William. I'm a freshwater specialist with Islands Trust. Islands Trust is a unique form of government. We have 13 local governments that come together as a trust council. And we have 450 islands in the Swishy Islands. And so there's really no way to have the scientists or technical person go around and collect data on all the islands. So it seems that citizen science is a word for it, but it seems like we need boots on the ground and collecting data. And there's been a lot of talk about data in the morning. And I'm just wondering if anybody wants to speak to the challenges of collecting that data and the importance of having a data framework in order to standardize the data that's coming in. So it can be utilized in provincial databases, or it can be utilized in analysis.
Okay, I'll start off, and maybe I think Dave might have some stuff to fill in and others, but kind of as I mentioned and introduced in my brief presentation there, we definitely turn to and rely on the province to set up those data protocols and standards, and then gain the internal capacity within our program at the regional level to then pass that along to the stewardship level. So it's things like, I was saying, the low flow, 5 and low flow, 5 and fall flush, so that's called the 5 and 30, and again, that's like protocols for analysis. In terms of how much data do they need in order to make it, even available to start to graph and chart and analyze. But beyond that, it's sort of, well, how do you collect the data? So sampling procedures, how to make sure that you're calibrating the equipment properly. So, there's lots involved, and I know the stewardship groups that do participate, if you had their trials and tribulations with working through, like, what can be pretty extensive in terms of calibrating equipment. But it's something you learn and you become familiar with, and it gives you that confidence that, okay, if I've calibrated this piece of monitoring equipment properly, and I go out in the field, that's going to collect good quality data. And on top of that, there's what we call the QA/QC component. So 10% of the sites that are monitored, we do lab analysis for on the turbidity side. So that means not only a grab sample in the field with a field monitoring equipment, so with the Lamont meter, but also collecting bottles that are sent to the lab, so couriered to the lab in the mainland, that will then make sure and kind of analyze, okay, did the values for turbidity within the lab sample match or be close to what was seen in the field sample? And what we've seen from the QA/QC over the years is that it's actually good instilling confidence in that the stewards are, completing the sampling in a way that's producing good QA/QC results. But that's a key element of it. It's not just go and collect the data however you like, write it down. And we even say this column, and have like a way for collecting the data, so there is that standardization. I'll just finish up by saying we do look to the province for that and really want to make sure they continue providing that role, whether that's on surface water quality information or whether that's on hydrometric, collecting stream flow information, groundwater levels, and everything like that. Did I get a bunch?
Yeah.
Are there buns in this section? Okay, sorry.
There are buns in this section. Just
All right, I hope we're done with the buns. Okay.
Information is better than no information. And I want to get Dave and maybe even Pete to talk a little bit about the value of the streamkeeper methodologies that have been developed and are actually standardized for use by community groups to collect information.
Exactly. That's where I was headed. So Streamkeeper's methodology was developed in the 90s, and the methodology it uses is based on the RIC standard, the Resource Inventory Committee that the BC government and the federal government resolved for data analysis. That data is collected in data sheets on the Streamkeeper's manual, and it is uploaded to the Streamkeeper's website. So we're collecting a standardized methodology and storing it and making it available. So there's a continuous data stream of comparable data, and it's apples and apples. That's so important. I can tell you that there was 7 different stream assessment methodologies out there, and it can be challenging at times.
Pete, describe some of the data collection methods, and like what the streamkeeper methodology, but what does that entail? What kind of information are these streamkeeper stewards collecting in the creek?
Well, I'll just give you the one example that I highlighted, which was Shelly Creek. We've used streamkeeper methodology for assessing stream channel and habitat quality. We originally used streamkeeper methodology for water sampling, but then have since moved into an upper, a more rigorous level with the provincial level. We've also upgraded from what we think is an upgrade from a streamkeeper level to a urban salmon habitat level of streamkeeper of habitat assessment. We've used a number of different methods to capture what we think are important data points for fish and fish habitat using streamkeeper methodology. And I just want one point. I just want to kind of go back to Julian's point about the ALR. And one thing that we have to do, or at least it's become very clear to me, at least in terms of 8 years of citizen science capturing it all, we have to get it written up. It has to be compiled and put into a form that can be moved into the realm of public engagement. So we have to find people that can write this stuff into a finding, and then we have to be able to bring it to the folks that need to listen to the subject. And in particular, on Shelly Creek, I have gone to the subdivision approval authority at the provincial level. I've talked to the provincial subdivision approving officer for the area. I've talked to the VHA health people to try and just basically inform them about the study and about issues. And so you have to kind of get to know all the jurisdictions and how that important that information is to touch all of the dots, or connect all the dots, to ensure that your data, which is very important to capture, very important to have long-term data sets, but it's also important to make sure that you're plugging the folks that need to hear the message. Okay, next.
So I had a question, I think, the fellow in the middle, your environmental plan or something?
Me, Rob Lawrance. Yeah, hi.
So one of the issues I've seen is that, in a lot of the stewardship activities, or in terms of planning and land use decisions, you're asking an individual or an individual landowner or a company or something like that to make the sacrifice for greater good. A lot of riparian reclamation issues in the U.S. and in Eastern Canada, they're looking at reclaiming riparian areas, but that means the landowners have to give up their land for the greater good of the stream and for the public. A lot of people see that as a good excuse to settle for a very high value. So in North Nanaimo, you made a comment about malls, but they logged a nice parcel of wooded land to build a furniture mall, which arguably maybe we need, I'm not sure. But my understanding is it's very difficult to downgrade a zoning once it's been zoned. And so someone who has a nice commercial parcel who can develop it as commercial land and sell it for high value is not going to want to downgrade it to, a wooded parcel that they're not being compensated for. So how do you provide incentives to try and retain some of the natural areas that we have, or provide incentives to landowners who otherwise would want to do something with their own land that they see as their own? And looking on social media, I see a great desire for landowners and support in this area for people to be able to do whatever they want with the land that they own. Not, there's and the legislation, I think, at least in Nanaimo, there's no, they're trying to strengthen it, but there's no protection for trees and these sorts of things. So, how do you keep that sort of stuff?
There is in the last couple of years, there has been some updates to the tree management bylaw. There are requirements to retain 20% trees beyond riparian areas. As I mentioned during the presentation, there already is setback legislation that protects riparian areas on properties that have watercourses running through them. And yes, when trees are cut down because of development, there is a price to pay. There is a fee that has to be paid, and that is used by the city to replant in other locations, whether that's parks, street trees, or other locations where that's possible. As far as incenting developers to retain tree canopy, we do that as much as we can during the development process, through the early negotiation process, to protect as much as we can on site. Through development applications or development permit areas such as the steep slopes DP, the intent there is to allow more clustered development, so concentrate development on the given site and allow more of the natural space to be left as is, whether it's tree cover or rocky outcrops or other significant features, and that's just another tool we use. And when the opportunity's there, it's working with conservation partners, whether that's NALT or the Nature Trust of BC. If there's an opportunity to leverage or provide funding to the property owner to purchase, that's another option. But that's not commonly used, but that's another tool in the toolbox.
Okay. Thanks, Rob. Welcome to the hard work of being a local government staffer, trying to manage the expectations of the community, the people that are holding land as part of their retirement profile, right? Difficult. The local governments are going to use the tools, but more importantly, they're going to use the science that's in front of them to put into tools to inform, influence, and make decisions around development applications that come in front of them, right? That's where the stewardship groups and the local governments can continue to build this science and knowledge base together, right? To help make better decisions. I think you had a question here, and then I'm going to come back to you. There you go.
Thank you. My name is Vanessa Scott. I'm from the Comox Valley. And my background is in communications and public engagement, so I'd really like to see the conversation move in this direction. I've recently been privy in the last several months to some public opinion polling showing that after housing affordability and the economy, the environment is now a top 3 concern for British Columbians. If you dig underneath that data, that's driven by concern about water. I think that's an incredible opportunity for us. Earlier this morning, we heard about teachable moments, and I don't think that those only are driven by the natural world. I think they're driven by our culture and our politics as well. Considering that British Columbia is incredibly polarized right now around issues of the environment, and that water is something which brings us together potentially, what are you doing in terms of storytelling and values to kind of bring out these issues like finding common ground and collaboration? I think those are 2 very important keywords today. Anyone, thank you very much for speaking to these.
I think I'd like to speak to that first, if that's okay. Well, the Canada C3 voyage, I'm not sure if any of you guys are familiar with that. It was a voyage from Eastern Canada all the way up into the northern parts of Canada and down to the west coast. And the Wetland Project was one of the projects that we were able to highlight and to show the rest of Canada what we're currently doing there. And so we had, I think, about 40 people from the Canada C3. We had our First Nations representatives with us, identifying some of those native plant species that are traditionally important to them. And we were also able to disseminate the type of work that we're currently doing in the field when we're out there as university students at the time. So I think those types of community engagement events, they do happen. They maybe aren't advertised on the platform that everybody kind of knows about, but I think it's those types of actions where you're able to pull in something large like Canada C3, invite greater members of the community to come out and see the same thing, but you're sharing scientific knowledge, traditional knowledge, and sharing that cultural value of what, in this case, wetlands.
That's great. I was going to jump in and on the topic of values, I think a really great resource, and I've printed it out and it's right beside one of my computer screens, is from the Freshwater Alliance, I believe it was, and it's on leading with shared values, and specifically leading on water issues with shared values. So I think you touched on a really good point, is that, no matter your walk of life, your background, water touches everybody, and I think it's something that that we can use as a common thread. Even when you're talking about the other priorities around the economy and affordable housing, I think you can even dig deeper and see that water is even a piece of that as well. So leading with shared values by the Freshwater Alliance, a great resource I would draw your attention to. What we do through our regional programming is through our Team Water Smart, which I'll touch on more in the afternoon, but that's our outreach and awareness component of our program. And so we get out into the community and in the urban and rural areas alike, talking to different audiences, from school groups and kids camps to, residents and homeowners, and working with industry and working with partners to continue to tell the stories, as well as disseminate and provide those, those ideas and the information that we're collecting, but also to hear back from people, what are the interests, what are the concerns, what are the values, and integrate that back into our programming. And the third and last thing I'll touch on in that respect is in working with First Nations is something we'd like to cultivate more of. And we recognize, it's good to start slow and build trust and build meaningful relationships. But one thing I can point to is working with the Qualicum First Nation and the Aboriginal Education Coordinator in School District 69, who helped us in terms of traditional place names within the watersheds and provided audio clips that we could add to our interactive mapping so that when folks go and click on a creek, on Englishman River, for example, you can hear an audio clip of, and I hope I say it right, but Kehomat is the Hokaminam way of saying that. And it gives a little description on, well, what does that mean and what was the origin? And in some cases, on some different places, gives different pronunciations and dialects, and just provides an interactive way to say, look at our watersheds, look at the landscape, look at our water resources, and hear maybe not the most common stories that we hear, but really important contributions to, the texture of the landscape, what that means for people who live here. So a few examples, yeah.
Okay, Dick. Good one. Quickly, Dick.
I get kids to lick rocks.
Nice, Dick.
We have a programmable report I'm playing hooky from right now. I've had 66 kids so far in torrential rain on Tuesday and Wednesday, and now it's sunny out, and I'm inside. Get this. Anyway, yeah, Gently Down the Creek Over report's been going for 27 years, and we have literally thrown every grade 5 school child from Port Alberni in the creek. And part of it is faking them out and getting them to lick a rock. Not really, but some do it.
Yeah, I appreciate the challenges. We have a hard enough time communicating this to our membership who are presumably engaged. So, yeah, it's something we struggle with, and I'm not sure what the solution is. We've tried and expand our online social media presence, but that captures very few people in pockets again. But even with, even as we sort of stumble through trying to get the message out, we have had some success, and, for the Streamkeepers courses, there's always a wait list for the next one. So, as we try and get better at this, at least we're catching some piece of it and doing it right.
Okay, one last one, and that would be me, and that's from a streamkeeper's perspective. The folks that need to know are the residents of the watershed or the creek shed. So we've started to go and knock on doors and see if we can go and sit down and have a kitchen table talk. That was that last picture in my slideshow. Is you gotta sit down and talk to them, engage.
I'm Barry Davis from Clough Beach, and there's different ways of doing things, and maybe just to talk to a couple. I'm listening to what Director Bell said in the Errington area, and about agricultural land reserve, but the gentleman one who put in his wetland. Normally we have just the opposite problem. Developers wanting to take it out of agricultural land reserve. Yeah. But the solution here is dedication of the land. Either Nature Trust or Land Conservancy. There's been many properties in our area that's done, and there's a lot of properties that people don't even know about that it's already happened. A good example, one that was recognized is Mr. Cook's property up on Shelly Creek that was dedicated to the regional district and to the Land Conservancy. Well, one of the real major ones for me is right in the heart of Qualicum Beach is a 55-acre forest. And it was slated for development, and a couple of residents said, we don't want that. They got together to raise some money. The council today, which I was part of, said, but even if we do that, how do we protect that for the future? Because the next council could change that overnight. So we did a three-way deal. We set up the Heritage Forest Commission, that is people from the town. We set up the Town of Qualicum Beach Council, and we got involved with the Land Commission and the Land Conservancy. We set up a three-way partnership, and with some language in it that would make it impossible to actually develop it. So that was our approach to that, because it was funds mainly raised from our residents. But the short answer to this, Mr. Bell, is the best way to do it if somebody is really serious Don't worry about the agricultural land commission. Don't worry about those other things. Dedicate the land to its service.
Yeah, the issue we have is that owning land is very expensive. So that's a real challenge for us. Like I say, we do own 2 parcels that are in the ALR because we can't put conservation covenants on them. But conservation covenants really are the stronger protection than ownership. Ownership can change, but a covenant travels on with title. So it's sort of a stopgap to own, but really it's about that placing a conservation covenant on title is really the better protection.
And maybe
sorry, I was going to just pipe in, and I know one of the things that's happened on the North Shore is we've gone to public referendum to dedicate parks land as conservation area as well. So once these special areas go to referendum and are voted on by the constituency and get dedicated, you require an undedication by referendum process to move that land out. Local governments have very, very strong and powerful authority when it comes to zoning of land as well. So there's lots of different tools around there.
And I was just going to add at the rezoning stage, and it doesn't necessarily relate to ALC lands, but there are other tools like having restrictive covenants placed on as a condition of rezoning. So in a property that might have significant environmental features, Gary Oak Meadows and such, it's possible to do no build, no vegetation removal covenants as well. So at a later date, when the larger properties develop, then a conversation can happen around park, dedicating that as park at a later date.
Thanks, I'm David Reed, and thanks for the kind words, Kim. Kim and I worked together on stormwater planning way back, and then even before that, was one of the co-authors of Stream Stewardship, which was the start of the stewardship, and several others. The documents are back here. I know from that experience that the role of a stewardship group and stream keepers is fundamental to success, and I'm so pleased to see you here. I'm also recognizing the importance of the data, but I also want to say, can we move with the data to deal with the problem at the source? So the data in the stream is looking at the problems that's the effect of land use that's up in the watershed. One of the things that's been mentioned many times is the idea of changing the way the land development is done, building in green infrastructure for land development. Sometimes it's done voluntarily, but one of the reasons it's not done more is because the engineering standards, the bylaws don't allow it. So the next priority is to change the engineering standards to make it at least allowed, if not required. And that would apply to streets and roads. But also, if you did that, then the development permits and the OCP, the official plans, could refer to those standards and say, please build this spring garden, please build this perfect bathing. It would expedite it all and remove a lot of barriers. Two precedents for what has been done. We worked with engineers in from Metro Vancouver, did a set of stormwater source control guidelines that are technical. They have detailed designs, they have specifications, they are the kind of things that go in the engineering standards. We worked with Campbell River, and they built those right into their bylaws. They changed their road widths and standards and their development permit language. So it's been done. What's needed is to have that done by Ministry of Highways in their standards and by every municipality. So I'm doing a selfish plug. There is a TV program here called, it's a series of modules called BC Adapt, and there's a bunch of cards at the Leonard booth here. They are designed for politicians and developers and landowners, so when you go and have the meeting with them, which is necessary, give them this card. Get this card, give it to them, and say, watch this. It's a series of 14 10-minute modules that cover from the high principles down to the details of how you could adapt to climate change in land development. And then the question in this long advertisement is, what could stream keepers do to make this happen? What could stream keepers do to get engineering standards changed? Thank you.
What a great question. Well, sure. They're doing it. They're Barry Davis is a good example of that. They're approaching counselors, educating. At one time, I was teaching streetwear courses to every mayor on the east coast of Vancouver Island. The only reason they were there was by the beck and call of the streetkeepers. They had to get some street cred. So I would say that the streetkeepers on the east coast of Vancouver Island and some communities on the west coast of Vancouver Island are doing a pretty good job of engaging at the local level with politicians who then trickle it down to their staff in communities. And Qualicum and Nanaimo are really good examples.
I think Peter's example of the hydrological modeling work they did on Shelly Creek is another great example.
Well, thank you for that lead-in.
Where technical information is going to be used to hopefully address exactly what the question was on.
I do want to just kind of highlight the one item, which was we had the study done, of course, on Shelly Creek. A portion of it goes through the city of Parksville. So off I went, and we were a delegation to council. And then at that council meeting, I was told, oh, by the way, we're reviewing our subdivision servicing guidelines. And can you provide some comments on them? Holy smokes. Have you ever seen a subdivision servicing guideline document? It is huge. I had to go through into Appendix 4, which was at about page 432, to find the commentary on stormwater. And there was a significant amount of material that was being put forward in advance. It had been actually advanced to the development community and to 3 engineering firms in the Parksville area. We never heard about the opportunity to have input onto this. It was a year-long process, and it was going to be approved the next council meeting. So we did submit a letter that was quite significant in terms of its detail to council, indicating that there were significant issues with the fact that rain gardens, interflow was never recognized. It's not all about increasing the size of a pipe when it comes to climate change. It's other issues. Got voted down. But I did get this phone call from the mayor who said, I want to talk to you. So we did have a talk, and he and the mayor and the head engineer and 3 councillors sat there and listened to what we really wanted to say to them was, you've got to start to open up their process and get some solutions to an issue that already is ingrained in engineering doublespeak. Anyways, my comment.
Storm Cunningham talked about restorative development, and yesterday we saw an example where I felt it should happen and certainly proposed, and that was at the 5-acre farm where some of the creek has actually been culverted before it gets to the Chase River, and that could be a salmon spawning area, that creek. What will it take to get that area daylighted? And that's not the only example. There's many creeks around town that have had a lot of culverting done, and we need daylighting out of them. But we're not talking about the future. We're talking about restorative from past planning and engineering decisions to culvert those streets. So where do we go from here? How do we get that daylighting done to those culverting streets?
So in the Harewood neighborhood plan, it does actually identify specifically around the 5-acre farm, the wetland area. It does identify some areas where there's opportunity, daylighting should be looked at as an option for some particular storm lines that go north and south of the wetland. And as development applications come forward, we have that conversation. It's still Still early days. We are purchasing some properties as well in anticipation of doing some daylighting, but that's not complete yet. So it's incremental, and it depends on budgets and availability and when development applications come up to have those conversations with the developer to secure land and eventually be able to do work like that. But it is flagged, it is identified in the neighborhood plan.
I think too, a bunch of us out here are doing, habitat stewardship work, but I think we also need to make that connection with like city works, that we're doing public infrastructure work. And as soon as we value that healthy, functioning creek shed, watershed as part of our public infrastructure, and not just at a high level, but boots on the ground folks too, then we can start working together on these projects. But we've all experienced where something that has been done for habitat stewardship has been undone for maintenance. So this is part of the Jean-Michel talks about silos to synergy. We have to break out of our silos and really make those connections.
Great, thanks. We are now a couple minutes after feeding time. And I want to hear from Annie here briefly, and then I'm going to go quickly check on the status of lunch as to whether we have a chance for a little bit more dialogue. I'm getting the thumbs up signal that I think lunch is on. So I'd love to hear from everyone. We don't have time, so I'm going to give Manny the last word here.
Sorry, Richard. We also there's one really good example of photos teed up from one of our local stream keepers. So I would hate for that to be missed. So I wonder if that could be maybe the last or second to last example.
Who is that going to be? Where is that person? Up here?
Can Bernie raise his hand?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just being shy, but I have his photos and I'll go through them.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
So
No, you don't have to come up.
Second to last word.
I'll be.
Thanks, Richard. I want to do, so my name is Emmanuel, I'm from the town of Gibsons. We support our national initiative called Municipal Natural Assets Initiative, and we recently released a document that it deals specifically with natural assets within private land. You can just look up mnai.ca and look under key documents. Of course, we work with Rob and his team at the city here in Nanaimo as well. And so there's lots of free resources, and it's a question that is particularly relevant to the islands and of course in Ontario as well. So that's our resources in terms of financial planning, land use planning, including payments for ecosystem services as a form of protecting those services within private land. So thanks very much.
Okay, as I said, Bernie Heinrich. We did a project in the Millstone River last fall, and we carried on this spring. And it was a follow-up on doing some work with Julie and her group on monitoring the water. And while we were monitoring this stream, we noticed this eroded bank in there. And we tried to get money through with Dave Clough to spend it on restoring that stream. And then we went up with 4 people, John Michelle and 3 other guys. We went up to Rosewall Creek. I never saw this before. I just finished. The one on the top left is a picture that we did in Rosewall Creek, where we're taking lessons on bioengineering restoration of eroded banks. And there were about 25 guys up there, or ladies also. And we took a course from Dave Holster for 2 days.
Hold the light to your mouth because you're taking.
Okay. The first day was a sit-down class, and the second day was cutting down cuttings and restoring the stream. It was done by cutting out, in this case it was willows, and digging holes into the side of the bank, and on the left-hand side was the cuttings put in. On the right-hand side you can see kind of a fence that was put in there. It's called a wall fence. And this was used to retain the stream on there. Just looking at it, you can see Jean Michel with the blue shirt on. I think I was taking the picture. So this course was done for like the 2 days on it. And after that was done, we got the inspiration to come back in and apply the same thing into the Millstone River. Top right-hand side is just another picture of Rosewall Creek. Okay, these are the pictures of the Millstone River, and this was the area where we were doing the sampling. And while we were doing this, we're looking at this bank. Dave looked at the bank, and he had some ideas on what to do with it. And then we thought, we ran out of time for funding, and we thought, well, let's just apply this technology we learned with bioengineering and put it here. So this is just a lot of experimental stuff that we threw in and tried different techniques. And by this fall, we should have a pretty good idea. It survived some really high water this winter, so I think it'll probably, it's gone this far, now we have to see if it's going to catch hold and grow for us.
Awesome. Thanks,
That's
Brent.
great. Thank you.
So thanks, Bernie. So there's another great example of an operation or an opportunity for collaboration. Local governments have an interest in restoring creek banks, preventing erosion and all of that. Training, learning, teaching the willing hands and elbows of the local stewards on how to use green materials like willows, stakes, and wattles, and plugs and all of that to help restore stream banks is a wonderful new opportunity.